Welcome to Seek Purpose, the podcast, where we support and empower people in recovery who want to turn their pain into purpose. This is our Thursday takeaway show where we dissect Monday's episode and bring you the best tips, tricks, and inspiration to support you in unleashing your purpose.
Transforming yourself is one thing, but managing recovery while in a relationship takes a whole new level. Did you get into a relationship in early recovery, or did you want to? Get in touch with us because we want to hear all about it.
In this episode, we're discussing the 13th step, the pros and cons of dating in early recovery, and finding purpose in your relationship. Okay, so the 13th step, huge topic in the recovery programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to say that the 13th step, I am definitely a success story of the 13th step. I know a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but I am. I always talk about my relationship being the longest one-night stand ever. But with, this is a big topic in recovery. Young people are coming in more and more. And what does that look like, getting involved in a relationship? And so many people are saying one thing and the other, and what's right and what's wrong. And,
Yeah, I know it worked out for you, but that is not common. Well, you know what? It's not common for any relationship to work out, to be honest. Like, you're going to kiss some frogs no matter what. But I know personally, I've watched people that have really struggled in relationships in early recovery. And for me, being in a relationship, because I was already married, I feel like it makes recovery kind of next level difficult, because you're not only managing your own feelings and like learning who you are and who you want to be, and you're growing and changing in a different direction than you have been. It changes the dynamic of your home and your relationship. So for me, I found that being in a relationship already was a little bit more difficult than what I saw my single friends going through, because they really had to only worry about themselves. And that's a luxury.
Yeah, the biggest thing was envying the people that were single, that were taking that time, and they didn't have the responsibilities of having to, care for or make another person happy. I was incapable of making my own self happy, let alone having to add him onto it. But, it did turn out. But I took a lot longer to get to situations or growth spurts. I don't know if they're people hit levels in their recovery. I took twice as long to get to those same levels that other people were doing really fast. So I can see now, once I was in a relationship, why people said no relationships in the first year. It was, I didn't listen.
You know what? The grass is always greener, though, because you think there's a lot of people that were single that are probably sitting there envying you, right? It can be lonely in early recovery. So yeah, it's funny how no matter what you have, the only person that's going to make you happy is you. Let's put it that way. And for those of you who don't know what a 13th step is, it's when somebody in early recovery gets into a relationship, usually with somebody that's not in early recovery. So there's kind of an imbalance there. And that's what we're talking about when we say 13th step. So what are the pros and cons of dating in early recovery? I know we just kind of discussed a couple of them, but for you, let's go with pros first, because you are married to the man that you 13th step with. So.
Actually, just to go back, can I just go back about the 13th step? Because it is true, it's about getting in a relationship early. But more importantly, because my husband, we laugh about being 13 stepped. But it's really when it can be a negative. Some people look at the 13th step as being taken advantage of, like a young person who is innocent, who doesn't understand the recovery world, and then somebody with more experience comes in and grabs them, which is really selfish of that individual. And my husband definitely admits that that's what happened. He was selfish. He saw me. He wanted me. And we got into a relationship, and I didn't have the ability at the time and the tools that it took for me to recognize that. So I kind of got taken advantage of. That can hurt, because obviously once I realized what happened, I'm like, then I resented him. And then I, of course, the envy and the jealousy of other people that took that time. But, 13 stepping can cause a lot of problems with people, and can definitely is one of the highest relapse. What's the word would you call it? Like most people, there we go. Yeah, causes for relapse is getting into a relationship really, really young. I'm grateful that my partner had enough sense and a strong enough recovery program to basically lay the boundaries on the ground in the beginning, the foundation. You drink, I'm out of here. You put me before your recovery or your women or your sponsor, I'm out of here. And he did that so strongly. So it did force me into making sure that my recovery stayed number one, which I think is a big downfall. You can get very codependent, going to the same meetings, doing everything with your partner. It turns into an addiction and we lose ourselves. So,
yeah, and we definitely talked about that a bit on episode 85 with Ronnie and Nathan, his partner. Oh my gosh. You know, if you're trying to stop your sponsees from dating in early recovery, I suggest not watching them because they're adorable and they make it look so freaking cute. And their story and their passion for each other and how it's just such a good episode. So make sure you go and listen to that. That's why we're discussing these things today. That's kind of the theme for the week for this month actually has been relationships. So we really wanted to dive into get more in depth with some of the tips and tools and things that came up on that episode. So yeah, I guess that's a big con of dating in early recovery is you're putting yourself at risk of being manipulated because you really don't understand yourself yet. And this person, if they have more recovery than you, has gone through this process. They really understand themselves. They understand how to use that against you in some ways. And I've definitely seen that happen. You know, just because we're in recovery doesn't mean we're all good people and we're still working our shit out for a very long time. So you know, it's really easy to be naive in early recovery. I think that's probably one of the biggest cons to dating at that time.
Yeah, and I think, you know, on the plus two is when we do get a little bit of recovery and we're able to see people that come in. I can certainly relate that, and I'm sure you can too, when we see young people or anybody coming into recovery, regardless if they're in a relationship or not, and how broken and hopeless they are. And we know from our own experiences that we come into recovery and we just find freedom. We change, we turn into the people that God really intended us to be. So when we look at women or men and you've been around for a bit and you see that, you see a beautiful spirit. Because I can certainly see that in women and men that are coming into, you know, the rooms of recovery of, oh man, like, don't you agree? So I think sometimes, you know, that's an attraction in itself, is seeing somebody and seeing stuff that I'm not able, like when I come in, I'm not able to see myself, but others can see that light inside. And that's quite attractive. That's what my husband used to tell me. I don't know. Does anybody believe that? I do.
Yeah, and I think if you're dating someone, this would only really work for your recovery. You're on the same path. Like you're going in the same direction, and having somewhere ahead of you in that path that can provide support and inspiration, if they have good intentions, can be a really great thing. Like, I mean, if you're both in early recovery and have no idea what you're doing, it could be a dumpster fire. But I definitely can see there being a pro to that. I know, you know, just so loneliness is something that comes up so much and is another reason why people relapse. Just feeling like you can't do this alone. And so having a partner can be a benefit. If you don't have a partner, like really get a good friend group, get a really good support group in recovery, just people that you know you can call on and connect with, because connection is so important. Mm-hmm. And it's more important than love connection. Just be connected.
That was what was quite beautiful and endearing, listening to this week's message with Ronnie and Nathan, that, you know, even though he had some recovery behind him, it's so incredible how Ronnie came in and he was doing some things that weren't really being practiced at the time, as well as what Ronnie was doing in the beginning. So it really benefited Nathan with the praying, you know, like, I don't know if I would have stuck around if Dave started praying. But I thought that was a really good message that was shared for sure this week.
Oh, it was great. They were amazing. Definitely a lot of pros to their relationship and recovery. And one of them was getting through a really, really difficult time where Nathan was actually arrested and Ronnie had to be on his own and try and navigate that. And there's some really beautiful, like, that's terrifying and scary and sounds like a con, but there's such beauty that came out of it, where Ronnie really learned to have more faith, and trust in God that everything was going to turn out and be okay, and prayed and really stuck by his partner, and just learned to love unconditionally, which is something that saved my life. My husband loved me through the most horrible thing I could think of doing to him, and that actually saved my life, and taught me how that I was able to be loved unconditionally, because I didn't know that. And it taught me that I can love unconditionally, that, you know, things don't need to end. You can work through things. You don't have to just like, let's go, like, start new start. I fucked this one up.
And how that is a big topic too, that we'll probably get into a different show for sure. But, you know, even when we're in a relationship and we come into recovery, how quickly we want to end things. Like, we think that's the solution, is just to close the book on that. That's the problem. I'm going to move over here. And, you know, I wanted to do that a million times. I wanted to leave him, but I'm grateful that other people around me that were in relationships and healthy relationships were teaching me, Suzanne, the one thing that's a common denominator is you. So that really made me stop in my track, to really start realizing that I need to take a look at myself. I need to go through my program. I really need to figure out what's going on for Suzanne before you all over the other person, and, you know, as the excuse to leave. And I'm still here 30 years later, because honestly, the common denominator of what the issues were, number one, my relationship with the guy upstairs. And then it came to my issues with myself, and then my husband. It's in that order.
Yes. You talk about that actually in Seeking Intimacy, your book, about making God the threesome in your relationship. I love that so much. It makes God feel a little icky. But
when we talk about having a menage a trois with God, is, you know, come on now. It's the only way to go for me. Bring him in.
Speaking of God, let's talk about purpose in your relationship. One way to bring purpose into your relationship, obviously, is get God in there, get connected, put that spirituality in your relationship. And that's also something we talked about on episode 85 with Ronnie and Nathan, was how they're putting spirituality in the relationship. And that it's so cool to hear how people like are praying together. It feels awkward at first. Still feels awkward in my relationship because my husband doesn't pray. He's not in recovery. So thinking of him sitting down and praying with me feels weird. But when we do it with our kids usually. It is the most beautiful thing, and it actually connects us, not just to a higher power, but to each other.
Mm-hmm. Actually, you know, and some people might be sitting there thinking like, there's no way I'm going to pray. Like your husband, mine included, even being in recovery, it was very awkward when we started actually praying together. But what we started doing before that happened, and this might be a little thing that may work for others if they're uncomfortable and get the ickies, is doing just reading a meditation, grabbing a book that you both might connect with. It doesn't even necessarily have to be 12-step or recovery based. It could be empowering. There's so many amazing, you know, everyday meditation books or weekly meditations that you can read. And just reading them out loud before you go to bed or in the morning. I found what I was starting to do that, and then sometimes I'd be like, he's not even listening. He's getting up, farting, taking a shit, you know, like he's not listening. But man, when I stopped doing it the next morning, he's like, are you going to read that? Why aren't you reading today? So even when you think they're not listening, that's something that worked, that I learned from somebody else. That shared that little tip and trick on how to connect in your relationship through that spiritual connection, even if they don't believe or in recovery.
Yeah, and actually our guests, Nikki and John, that were on at the beginning of the month, they had some really good tips on that as well, and on building your relationship. They're actually marriage coaches, so if you guys are looking for some more, if you're in a relationship and you're looking for some tips and insights and inspiration and a couple to look up to, go check out that episode. One of the things they talked about was finding a mentor, and it's just somebody that you look at their relationship and say, that's what I want, just like finding a sponsor. Yeah. So you find your relationship sponsor and say, I love how they love each other. Like that's what I want in my relationship. And just starting conversations and asking them what they're doing and how they're living and how they get through problems is a really great way to start building those skills, because we are not typically taught how to have a good relationship. If you've ended up an addict, it's not because you know how to have good relationships. And yeah, a lot of us have felt a lot of trauma and pain watching our parents go through their divorces or fighting or whatever it is, or getting abused. So finding healthy relationships to look up to, books to read, people to listen to, podcasts, stuff like that is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Some of the most incredible messages and tips that we've learned are literally from people that are nothing to do with our inner circle. I remember being at a hockey rink and a grandparent couple. Like there's grandparents that came to watch some kid on a different team in the middle of Red Deer, I think it was. And they were the cutest couple. My husband and I both watched them, just how he treated her. And I was like, oh, and my husband ended up having a conversation in a lineup, getting a coffee at the concession stand. And we were together and we're kind of like, and he said, hey, how do you stay together for so long, to the guy, right? And he turns around and looks at us and this old man, and he's like, you know something? It's really quite simple. He goes, what's your name? And he goes, Dave. And he goes, what's your name, Suzanne? Well, Dave and Suzanne, this is the trick that I've learned to stay married for 62 years. And we're all like, ears. What's the trick? And he goes, yes, dear. And that's it. That was the best tip. And that's the thing that my husband always says to this day. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. So, yeah, which is actually moving into our purpose, right? Is like how do we find purpose in our relationship, and trying to find things to better each other, I think is what we definitely heard this week.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is, like, with our purpose is how we light up others, how we serve the world, what we're going to bring to the world, how we're using our past, our pain, our triumphs to bring purpose into our relationship. And I think the big thing is service to your partner, and stop thinking of yourself, which is like the answer to everything.
Oh my God, what a shocker.
Like, just show up in your relationship thinking like, how can I serve? How can I make this relationship better? How can I support my partner more? Ronnie really showed that beautifully in the episode of how he supports Nathan and how he did support Nathan through a really, really difficult time, and vice versa. It's so cool to get to do this podcast and witness these people like all around the world and how they're doing the recovery and how they're doing them in a relationship, because I mean, that's something I always want to know. Relationships are the hardest thing next to getting sober.
That, I'm glad you said that, because it's true. Like, hands down, getting sober, folks, handling mental health issues throughout my life, and I'm sure you'll really, nothing is actually more difficult. You think that would be more difficult? No, it's actually, staying in a relationship and working through the stuff. And I just love the fact that the little tips of my husband learned of yes, dear, really helped our marriage. And the other thing, the little tip is do not leave your relationship angry. That messed me up so often. It's like, how the hell can I not leave this relationship? I mean, that's whenever I want to leave, is whenever I'm pissed. And usually when I'm pissed, it's when I'm hurt. And behind hurt in recovery, we learn that there's something underneath. It's usually not the first time we felt this. This is not the first time this dick did this to me or whatever. Like I go those places, right? But yeah, so I just love hearing the transformations too. And we've got we had another couple on way back. If you guys want to go back to the beginning, which is probably the standout is Selena and Devin. That episode, I think it's around maybe 30. You just got to go back and listen to us all. But Selena and her relationship with her partner, who we classify as a normie. I think that was the name of the episode, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, I can't even remember. That was like season 1 or season 2?
I think it was season 2, but yeah, that really showed, how incredible a relationship can grow and transform when another really thinks of the other, and how a lot of their story was about that, about just honoring each other.
Yeah, they really found a way to put purpose into a relationship as well. They traveled around the world, um, just like exploring, doing new things, loving on each other, building this new life together. And it's just so cool. It's so cool to hear their story, their journey. We have to have them back to see where they're at now because they can't be jet setting anymore.
We already told Ronnie and Nathan we're gonna come back because the one thing that'll be a standout you'll hear them say a couple times is about there's a reason why we're together, and that is going to be exciting to follow.
Our relationships can really be a mirror to ourselves and help us grow faster than normal because we're going to be tested. Our buttons are going to be pushed. Our partners are the ones that can, make us the angriest and the most irritated, probably the one that shows up on my resentment list the most, that I have to make amends to almost every day. So that's really where I get to explore my character defects, really see where I have work to do, and that can be a really big benefit. Like, you can grow a lot quicker that way because you're being tested.
That is such a good point.
All right, well, these were our thoughts and experiences with relationships in recovery. What are yours?
And here's what Ronnie had to say about getting through the most difficult times in his relationship so far in our episode 85.
And it taught me to fearlessly love someone, even when you don't know. You know what I mean? When you don't understand, like I realized, like, damn, I don't have any idea what's going on right now. But what I do know is that I want to be there for him as much as I can because I care about him.
Don't think about what your relationship can do for you. Think about what you can do for your relationship.
And remember, the most important relationship you will ever have will be between you and your God.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want to dive deeper into relationships and intimacy, we have an amazing guide called Seeking Intimacy by the lovely Suzanne Logan. And it is available now on our website, www.seekpurposenow.com. Come and join us on social media. We are on Facebook at Seek Purpose Now, on Instagram at Seek Purpose Now, and we also have a recovery group, facebook.com/group/Seek Purpose Now.